Hi guys, we're back in Kerbal Space Program, and today, as you can see in the background there, we are visiting Jool, the Jool system. Jool is the biggest planet in the solar system of Kerbal Space Program, and it has 5 moons, all of them very unique and interesting in their own way. So today we're going to be visiting them, and as you can see, I've got this fairly sizable station I've brought all the way out here, packed with Kerbals. You can see at the back there, it's kind of built in a modular way. It was built in low Kerbin orbit, so there's the thrusters kind of at the back there, some solar panels and some kind of living quarters in the middle, and some other like sundry things, some extra fuel tanks and so on. But at the front we have 5 spacecraft, and each of these is uniquely designed. A couple of them are very, very similar in design, but they're all designed to visit the 5 moons of Jool. And as you can see, we've also got just scrolling through a lot of Kerbals here. So we're going to do this kind of in order from out to in. So we're going to go from the outer moons to the inner ones. And essentially the furthest out you can go when you're in the Jool system in terms of the moons is Pol, which is a very, very tiny little moon right on the edge of the Jool system. And to get to it is not too much of a challenge. It is a small moon, so it's quite hard to encounter. You have to be very, very accurate when you try to get to it. But as always, with anything like this, the first thing you're going to want to do is align yourself. You can see it has a slightly eccentric orbit, and we're going to have to align ourselves before we even think about trying to get out there. Now, with all the moons of Jool, they have their own, as I say, sort of unique aspects to them, and Pol really is ultimately just the smallest, I believe. It's certainly the hardest to encounter. You can see, having made my alignment burn, I'm now just making sure that I'm pointing straight at Pol when I make this transfer. What I actually want to do to save as much fuel as possible to land on it, because that's what I'm going to do, I'm actually aiming to effectively hit it. If you look here, as I'm approaching, I didn't actually quite get the burn quite right. So what I'm doing is I'm fiddling around just before I reach Pol, so that when I get to it, I will be able to drop down straight onto the surface. Pol is really, really small. It has no atmosphere, and because it's small, it means that actually you can just go with even a fairly weak engine. This engine I've got here is very, very, very weak. But ultimately, because it's so small, we can slow down very, very easily to come into a landing. It's very similar to landing on the Mun or the Minmus, or if you land on any of the other things like Gilly, it's extremely similar to landing on those. And all we're going to do here really is go in nice and close. So as I said before, we're going to be trying to get to all 5 moons of Jool. Now they all differ slightly, and all of them have some very, very nice science points if you're in career or science mode, so it's definitely worth visiting them if you're in the area. They do pose a challenge. Pol, for instance, although it is easy to kind of land on because in terms of fuel, you don't need to use too much fuel. You could probably do this just with RCS thrust rather than necessarily main thrust. But as we get a little bit lower, you'll suddenly see the slight issue with landing on Pol, besides encountering it. Encountering it's quite difficult, as I said, because it's so small. But as you can see there, kind of coming into view, that's a bit of a visual thing there, makes it a bit difficult to see, but they are slowly kind of fading in. Are these little spikes almost on the ground, little rocks, a bit like landing on Duna, but there's way more of them. You need to be careful you don't land on them, because like landing on Duna, if you hit them, you could damage your craft, flip it over, God knows what. In this case, I just happened to be very, very lucky that I wasn't coming right down on top of them or into a group of them. And as with landing on the Mun or the Minmus, just a case of managing your speed as you come down onto the moon. It's very, very easy to kind of actually in terms of this moon, very, very easy to actually overthrust. You see me do it in a second as we come down. There, I actually overthrust a little bit, and I kind of bounce back up. No big deal, because I can correct it with the RCS thrust, but just worth pointing out. And in fact, I do bounce, I think, as well a little bit here. Yep, there we go, a little bit of a bounce. But I've got lights and things, which are always advisable when you're landing on planets and moons, just to give yourself a bit more illumination as you come up to the ground. And there we are, we're down. Big, fairly sizable and long craft this, so I've got some ladders on the other side. So all I'm going to do is do some science while I'm here, get my antenna out so I can transmit it back and keep contact with the station. But as you can see, I have some ladders coming down, and I'm going to get one of the lads out to pop down and do the usual, EVA stuff. Do a EVA report and surface samples and stuff like that. And once you're done, you can just take off from there quite easily. Now we're heading to Bob. I should note I actually didn't do this in the same order that I'm showing the moons off, so that's why there's still some stuff attached there. The other ship is actually still attached, which is confusing. But as I say, I just didn't do this in exactly the same order I'm doing now. But this one we are taking off to Bob. Now Bob, as you can see here, I've already targeted. I think. Oh no, I haven't. Here we go. I'm going to target it now. He is extremely eccentric. His orbit is extremely eccentric, as you can see. So once again, you need to align to this. You could, if you were really lucky, try to encounter it without almost where those intersects are, without aligning. You do use fuel, obviously, to align, but it would be very, very difficult. Bop, again, is very, very small, like Pole, an extremely small moon. So encountering it is difficult enough as it is. Once again, though, I am not bothering to orbit this, so I'm heading straight for it with my transfer. And once again, once you're here, it's a case of effectively just descending down. Landing on it is extremely similar to Pole, it's just a bit bumpier. So up next is the Mammoth planet of Tylo. I beg your pardon, Mammoth moon of Tylo. It is absolutely massive. In fact, we can actually see it there. We're just behind the craft. Now, what you'll notice on this particular spaceship that's going to go down onto Tylo is that there's actually these thrusters here. These are, your eyes aren't deceiving you, these are solid rocket boosters. Why do we need those? Well, Tylo is almost the same size as Kerbal, I believe, and it is huge. It is a massive, massive planet, but it has no, I beg your pardon, moon, but it has no atmosphere. So unlike Kerbal, where you're slowed down by atmospheric forces and you can use parachutes, that won't work on Tylo. So Tylo is absolutely massive, and you have to use a huge amount of fuel to slow down. It's, I think, the biggest moon in the game, and it really, really is massive. The reason we therefore have these solid rocket booster thrusters, if you like, is because, quite simply, the amount of fuel required to slow down enough to land is excessive. It is a huge amount of fuel that you require to land, and liquid fuel just isn't enough. And any of those kind of more efficient fuel sources just won't work. They're just too little. So here we go, coming down onto the planet, onto the moon. Sorry, now I'm using those massive solid rocket fuel boosters, or I should say the massive velocity of those, to slow myself down. And you can see my speed is dropping off substantially. You'll be moving well over 2,000 meters a second when you approach Tylo. So it's very unlike landing on, say, Bop or Pole, where it's very, very easy, as you saw earlier. It's extremely tricky to do. But once you get low enough, it's exactly the same as landing on any other moon. You just effectively need to put yourself down carefully. And now we're moving on to Val. It's much the same with Val. Val is smaller than Tylo, quite substantially smaller than Tylo, but again, it's a big moon. It has no atmosphere, and as again with all the other moons I've been to so far, we're going to make a straight shot to it. I'm not going to bother going into orbit. If you were doing this for the science points, you'd probably want to go into an orbit and do your orbital science and stuff like that. Getting to it, like Tylo, is very easy because it's so big. Encountering it is easy, unlike with Bop or Pole. But in this case, the encountering is not the hard thing, it's getting down onto it. You are going to use a substantial amount of fuel. I don't need the solid rocket boosters for landing on Tylo so much, but you do use a huge amount of fuel when you go down to land on Val. Here is the final moon then. We have probably the most interesting moon of all surrounding Jool, which is Lathe. And Lathe, you can instantly see, requires something a little bit different. This craft, as you saw there, has not only wings but also parachutes, and that's because Lathe has an atmosphere like Kerbal. If you're planning on going to an orbit around Lathe, I believe the safe sort of height is about 65,000 meters, so it's not quite as big as Kerbal in terms of or its atmosphere isn't quite as high as Kerbal. This time, though, as before, I'm not going to bother going into orbit. I'm just going to go straight at the moon. So in this case, we're just spinning forward, and as I kind of encounter Lathe, I'm going to be pulled in by its gravity, and the idea is to land. Now, this is why I have my wings attached to this craft, and some parachutes. Landing on Lathe is extremely easy, really, provided you can survive the re-entry heats, which aren't anywhere near as bad as Kerbin. But you can see, when we zoom in there, it has water, and very little land, which is actually in itself a bit of a problem, because what I want to do in this one, in this landing scenario, is land on land. I want to actually not land in the sea. And I actually managed to do this. You can see the re-entry happening there, entry heat, but the wings are keeping me in a nice flat position as I come over. And you can see that does reduce. You have to be very careful landing on Lathe because quite simply, you're going to reduce your speed as you come in by encountering the atmosphere. Here's another scenario. This is actually not from the ship that you just saw, not from the station. This is kind of just a test I was doing with a silly little thing, but I wanted to get guys down onto some Kerbals down into the sea, the Sagan Sea as it's known on Lathe. I wanted to actually get them into the water. I actually wanted to do a water landing. So what I've done is I've sent this ridiculous looking ship with all these fuel tanks around the outside, and they're going to kind of act like a raft. So they kind of act like buoyancy for this to land in the sea with any luck. So what I'm doing is, again, I'm kind of making sure using the map that I'm sort of targeting the sea. As I come in, you can see a huge amount of re-entry heat, but those tanks and so on the back obviously reduce my aerodynamics massively compared with the other craft we just saw. And so slowing down is no issue. We slow down really, really, really rapidly, and once we're in the atmosphere and obviously falling now towards the sea, I can get rid of that engine, which is now basically out of fuel, and deploy a lot of parachutes, because obviously this is heavy. Now you can probably already guess, having looked at this craft, what's going to happen, because these Kerbals, obviously I want to get them back, as with all Kerbals, you want to get them home. So in this instance, they're going to parachute and pop down into the sea, and you can see we're dropping down at a very, very slow speed, under 9 meters a second, massive splash, and yep, the raft holds. So the raft has actually managed to keep us afloat, which is a bit of a miracle, if I'm honest, but it has managed to keep us afloat. And now we can carry out the usual stuff. We can do our science, if we want to. But what I want to do, more than anything else, is get a ladder down and get a Kerbal out there and have them climb down from the main capsule there and take some samples from the water, because, hey, that might not even be water, we don't know. Could be anything, I suppose, in theory. We haven't tested it. So he's gone and got his samples, and he's ready to climb back in. Now you can see from the design of this exactly what's going to happen. Effectively, this craft now just needs to separate itself from the raft. So up comes the ladder, and we put the throttle up, make sure everything's ready, the guys are strapped in, and off they go. Literally there, just taking off from the raft. So the raft's probably destroyed beneath us, but no problems. We've actually managed to get back off of Lathe with our sample from the Sagan Sea, and that is big in terms of science. It gets you a lot of science points for doing that, so it's definitely worth doing if you can. And that's kind of it. We've been to all 5 of the moons. That's a rough guide to landing on, or encountering and landing on all of them. As I say, you get massive science points. It's always a risk-reward in Kerbal Space Program, and in this instance it's no different. Landing on those moons gets you huge amounts of science points, as does orbiting them, in fairness. If you just want to get into orbit, that's also going to get you some very, very good science points. So the rest of them are left up here to do whatever they need to do aboard this science station, and I guess we'll leave it there. We'll leave this guy in the bottom right here tapping away merrily on his keyboard. As always, guys, hope the video was helpful, and I'll see you next time.